February 2022. In a matter of days, nearly $300 billion vanished from Russia's war chest, frozen in the largest financial strike since the Cold War. But as Kyiv's defense gets funded by those very assets, Moscow's last lifeline, its massive gold stockpile, now faces cracks of its own. What nobody expected is just how quickly this financial battleground could turn against everyone involved. The real story of what Russia lost begins on the day the world froze. G7 leaders wasted no time. Within 72 hours of Russian tanks rolling into Ukraine, finance ministers and central bankers from the world's richest democracies met in emergency video calls. Their decision was to freeze nearly $300 billion in Russian central bank reserves held outside Moscow. The order swept through financial capitals, Brussels, London, Zurich, and Tokyo, locking down foreign exchange reserves, sovereign bonds, and securities stashed in accounts from Euroclear in Belgium to the Bank of England. Central bank officials watched as access to hundreds of billions in euros, dollars, and pounds was cut off with a few keystrokes. In Brussels, Euroclear's ledgers shifted overnight, immobilizing the lion's share, nearly 210 billion euros, of Russia's reserves. The UK and Switzerland moved in parallel, blocking Russian holdings and shutting down key banking channels. Legal notices landed at major clearinghouses, freezing not just state funds, but also the assets of sanctioned oligarchs and their companies. By the end of that first week, Russia's war chest was no longer just depleted. It was locked behind doors Moscow could not open. The sheer scale of the freeze sent shockwaves through global markets. Never before had a G7 coalition immobilized so much sovereign wealth, and never in such a coordinated strike. The world's financial system had turned into a weapon, and the numbers told the story. Nearly $300 billion frozen in place as the opening shot in a new kind of war. National governments wasted little time taking their own steps. In London, Her Majesty's Treasury published a growing list of sanctioned Russian oligarchs, freezing luxury properties, private jets, and bank accounts linked to Kremlin insiders. Swiss authorities followed suit, blocking billions in assets across banks in Zurich and Geneva, and French officials moved against yachts docked on the Riviera. By late 2022, these targeted freezes extended well beyond central bank reserves, reaching the personal fortunes and companies of 1,500 Russian individuals and over 200 entities across Europe. President Zelensky pressed the issue on the world stage, urging the EU and G7 leaders to go further, not just freezing assets, but using the proceeds to fund Ukraine's defense and reconstruction. His speeches before the EU Parliament and at G7 summits called for turning Russia's wealth into a shield for Ukraine. Policymakers in Brussels took up the debate, launching a working group in October 2023 to study how interest from immobilized Russian assets could be redirected. The proposal faced pushback from some member states wary of legal risks, but the idea gained traction as the war dragged on. The conversation shifted from emergency freezes to designing permanent mechanisms for channeling profits from locked assets. Behind closed doors, officials weighed the technical and legal challenges, setting the stage for the next phase, turning immobilized wealth into a weapon of financial leverage. Euroclear, a little-known financial giant headquartered in Brussels, holds the keys to nearly all of Russia's immobilized central bank reserves in Europe. Out of 210 billion euros locked down by EU sanctions, Euroclear alone accounts for about 90%, roughly 190 to 200 billion euros, according to its most recent filings. This single node of control is no accident. For years, Russia's central bank parked its foreign currency reserves, mainly in euros, directly in Euroclear's accounts, trusting the institution's reputation for security and neutrality. But when the sanctions order hit, those ledgers became the front line of a new financial offensive. Unlike a traditional bank, Euroclear acts as a central securities depository. It does not own the assets it holds, but it controls every movement, settling trades, collecting interest, and reporting balances. Once the freeze went into effect, Euroclear's systems simply stopped processing any transfer instructions from Moscow. The money remained on the books, but Russia lost all access, unable to move, sell, or even pledge these reserves as collateral. Legal filings show that, as of late 2025, Euroclear still lists over 193 billion euros in sanctioned Russian assets, a figure that dwarfs any other custodian in the EU or UK. This concentration gives Western policymakers enormous leverage. With so much of Russia's foreign wealth sitting in one place, the EU can enforce and monitor the freeze with unmatched precision. It also creates a single, powerful source of revenue, interest earned on these frozen reserves. Euroclear's annual accounts reveal billions in extraordinary revenue generated just from holding Russia's money in limbo, a pool now earmarked to support Ukraine. In the world of financial warfare, control is not just about size, it is about custody, and right now, Euroclear holds nearly all the cards. Interest earned on Russia's immobilized reserves is no longer just a bookkeeping detail. It has become a stream of ammunition for Ukraine's defense. On July 1, 2025, Euroclear transferred 1.6 billion euros in extraordinary revenue from frozen Russian assets directly to a European fund dedicated to supporting Kyiv. These are not hypothetical numbers. The cash moved from Brussels to the European Union Ukraine Support Facility, bypassing Moscow entirely. The transfer was public, documented in Euroclear quarterly accounts, and confirmed by a European Council statement. For Ukraine, this meant immediate relief, funds that reduced its borrowing costs and helped keep the government running as the war ground on. But the story does not end with a single payment. In early 2026, Euroclear is set to transfer another 1.4 billion euros in proceeds, part of a regular schedule that now delivers Russian money to Ukraine on a rolling basis. The European Union finance ministers, after months of debate and legal review, have approved a 90 billion euro loan package for 2026 and 2027. This package is backed by the expectation that interest from immobilized Russian assets will continue to flow, and that Russia, not Ukraine, will ultimately foot the bill. As a sanctions lawyer from Brussels explains, the legal distinction is clear. The assets remain frozen, not seized, but the profits generated are fair game for the European Union to allocate as it sees fit. This approach sidesteps thorny questions about outright confiscation, while still turning Russia's lost reserves into real financial pressure on the battlefield. For Ukraine, the impact is immediate and measurable. Its average borrowing costs have dropped from over 7% to below 5%, and the repayment burden is deferred until Russia pays reparations. The West's financial innovation has transformed immobilized wealth into a weapon, one that fires every time interest accrues. Behind the scenes, Russia's central bankers turn to gold as their ultimate fallback. Over 2,300 tons now sit in the Bank of Russia's vaults, one of the largest official stockpiles in the world. Gold's appeal is simple. It is outside the Western banking system, and in theory can be sold or swapped for hard currency even when dollars and euros are off limits. But moving this gold into cash is not as straightforward as it once was. With London and Zurich markets closed to Russian bullion, Moscow has relied on alternative routes. Dubai, in particular, has become a crucial hub. In 2023, Russian gold flowed through Dubai's refineries and trading houses, then on to buyers in India and beyond. These sales brought in much-needed foreign currency, helping Russia pay for imports and prop up the ruble. Every successful shipment depended on a network of brokers, discreet logistics, and the willingness of foreign buyers to look past sanctions. The entire system, though, hinges on the ability to keep these channels open and the gold trade running smoothly. On May 3, 2023, the London Bullion Market Association issued a suspension notice that sent brokers scrambling. Overnight, Russian gold was locked out of the world's largest precious metals market. Intermediaries in London and Zurich halted settlement on Russian bars, freezing billions in expected cash flow. Moscow's network of brokers, already forced into shadowy deals through Dubai, now faced a sudden rupture in their last remaining trade routes. For Ukraine, the fallout delivered a windfall. As Western markets shut Russia out, yields on Ukrainian debt tumbled from above 7% to just 4.55%, relieving pressure on Kiev's budget and signaling to investors that Europe's financial firewall was holding. But Moscow did not sit idle. In late 2025, Russia's central bank filed a lawsuit in a Moscow court, demanding 195.54 billion euros in damages from Euroclear. The claim, one of the largest in financial history, accused the Belgian clearinghouse of unlawful expropriation. Legal teams on both sides prepared for a courtroom battle with global stakes, as the precedent could redefine the rules of economic warfare. The pipeline of Russian money had been severed, but the fight for control was just beginning. As billions in frozen Russian assets now fund Ukraine's defense and cracks appear in Moscow's gold reserves, the financial battlefield shifts by the day. In a world where money moves faster than armies, the next collapse may not come from the front lines. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that shape tomorrow.